The Dracula you know wears a cape, flashes fangs, and hides in a coffin until nightfall. But peel back the fiction, and what do we find? Where does Count Dracula come from? And why are the lines between myth and reality so blurry? Could he be a real man? Some say a ruler whose name alone inspired terror. Did he really drink blood, or simply create rivers of it? Join us as we explore which is truly more terrifying. The immortal vampire of legend, the mortal warlord who became myth, or a figure born from the mass primal fears of the people. This is Vortex Mythology. Step into the darkness with us and subscribe, like and share. To uncover the truth, let's rewind the clock, not yet to medieval Transylvania, but to the flickering candlelight of Victorian studies, where one man gave Dracula his second life. His name was Bram Stoker, and here's the twist. When Dracula hit the shelves in 1897, Stoker was not a famous novelist at all. He was grinding away as a theatre manager in London, working under the legendary actor Henry Irving. Irving's commanding stage presence and aristocratic style, that would become the very template of Count Dracula. But Stoker's obsession with horror started long before. As a sickly child in Dublin, often trapped in bed, he was fed terrifying bedtime stories from his mother. True stories from the Irish cholera epidemic. Tales of people buried alive, coffins carried away before death had fully claimed them. Imagine being a child unable to move and hearing that, and those nightmares never left him. It wasn't just the cholera stories. Irish folklore crept in too. The Avatak, a blood-drinking chieftain who clawed his way out of the grave. And the Banshee, her cries a death sentence to anyone who heard them. These were not fairy tales, they were whispers of terror, shaping Stoker's imagination. And by the time he moved to London, Gothic horror was already in the air. John Polidori's The Vampyre introduced the elegant predator. Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmilla gave us the seductive deadly vampire. But Stoker wanted something bigger, something that blended folklore, real history, and primal fears, and so he dug deep. He devoured Emily Gerard's Transylvanian Superstitions, with peasants warding off the undead using garlic and holy water. He stumbled on William Wilkinson's account of the Wallachia, casually mentioning a ruthless prince named Dracula, and in his notes Stoker underlined the name and scribbled, "Dracula means devil." And that was it. He had found his monster. But instead of writing pure history, he stitched together everything. Folklore, theatre, Victorian fears of immigration, disease, even sexuality, all reborn in one unforgettable figure, Count Dracula. But who was the real man behind the terrifying name? To answer that, we have to leave the gaslit streets of London and step into the brutal world of 15th century Wallachia. Vlad III was born in 1431 in the Transylvanian town of Siishara. Though he would one day rule Wallachia, his father Vlad II was inducted into the Order of the Dragon. This was a brotherhood dedicated to defending Christian Europe against the advancing Ottoman Empire. And from this order came the name Dracul, meaning dragon. His son then was Dracula, the son of dragon. But in Romanian, Drac also meant devil, and that dual meaning, dragon and demon, clung to him for life. Vlad's childhood was no fairy tale either. At the age of 11, he and his younger brother Radu were taken as hostages to the Ottoman court. There, young Vlad witnessed torture, executions, and acts of cruelty designed to break enemies' spirits. He learned lessons that no child should, that power is fragile, and fear is stronger than love. When Vlad's father and older brother were assassinated back home, he returned determined not just to claim his throne, but to keep it by ruling with terror so absolute that betrayal became unthinkable. And so began a reign that would echo through history, built on stakes, steel, and rivers of blood. Vlad Dracula ruled Wallachia in the 1400s, and his name became known for just one thing: impalement. This was not a quick death. Victims were pushed onto sharp stakes, sometimes through the chest, sometimes in crueler ways. They would suffer for hours, even days. Imagine riding into a city, and instead of gates or banners you see a forest of bodies on stakes, swaying in the wind. The stories are brutal. At one feast, Vlad invited 200 nobles he didn't trust. After the banquet, he had them all impaled. When Ottoman envoys refused to remove their turbans, Vlad nailed them to their heads. And in his capital, he placed a golden cup in the town square. Anyone could drink from it, yet no one dared steal it. Everyone knew the punishment. He was ruthless. Merchants were massacred, peasants boiled alive, whole families of rebels were wiped out. And yet, to Romanians, Vlad was a hero. He kept order. He fought off the Ottomans, and to them he was a protector, not a monster. But once his story spread beyond his homeland, it twisted into legend until Vlad the Ruler became Vlad the Nightmare. The Ottomans called him Kazakh Bey, the Impaler Lord. German printers churned out pamphlets filled with grisly tales of his atrocities, complete with woodcut illustrations of impaled victims and bloody feasts. These pamphlets were the viral horror stories of the day, spreading faster than fact. They claimed that Vlad drank blood, and that he washed his bread in it before meals. He dined among the dying. None of this had evidence, but it didn't matter. Fear rarely waits for truth. Even his death added mystery. In 1476, Vlad was killed. Whether in battle against the Ottomans or betrayed by his own boyars is still debated. But his body was never definitively recovered. Some accounts placed him in a monastery grave, others whispered that he had no grave at all, and so the legend deepened. A tyrant with no confirmed burial? For many, that could only mean one thing: he never truly died. And centuries later, Bram Stoker would find this legend waiting, ripe for reinvention. But when he resurrected Dracula, he transformed him into something far more universal than a medieval warlord. In his notes, Stoker underlined that name, Dracula, and he jotted down means devil. That one chilling detail was enough to fuse the real and the fictional. But instead of recreating Vlad the Impaler, Stoker borrowed only the name, and perhaps the faint echo of cruelty and blood. Into this frame he poured centuries of vampire lore. From Emily Gerard he borrowed garlic, mirrors, and the superstition that the undead could not cross running water. From Polidori's Lord Ruthen and Le Fanu's Carmilla he inherited the vampire as aristocratic predator. And from Victorian London he absorbed fears of foreign invaders, of diseases spreading through ports, and of sexual corruption and degeneration. And the result was Count Dracula, a figure who was part history, part folklore, and part cultural nightmare. No longer a warlord impaling enemies, but an immortal nobleman haunting the imagination of the West. And once this new Dracula took shape, he would never stay in one form for long. Each generation would carve him anew, keeping him alive long after his creator's death. When Bram Stoker's Dracula came out in 1897, it was not a smash hit. But the moment the Count stepped onto the movie screen, his immortality was sealed. Thought to be born much earlier, Nosferatu gave us a nightmare screen version in 1922. A rat-like creature creeping through shadows, a walking plague spreading death. Then, in 1931, Bela Lugosi changed everything. With slicked back hair, a sweeping cape, and that hypnotic stare, Dracula became elegant, aristocratic, and dangerously charming. By 1958, Christopher Lee redefined him. His Dracula was violent, dripping with blood and raw sexuality, so shocking audiences gasped in theatres. From there, he never stopped evolving. Anne Rice's novel turned him tragic, almost romantic. Twilight transformed the vampire into a teenage crush, and Castlevania recasted him as a mythic overlord. And in comedies, he became a parody. Never truly scary, but never gone either. So why does Dracula endure? Because he's not just a character, he's a mirror. In every age he reflects what we fear most: plague, invasion, forbidden desire, or even the curse of living forever. Which leaves us with the real question: who is scarier? The Count of fiction, or the prince who left forests of the impaled in his wake? Vlad the Impaler may not have been a vampire. He may not have lived forever, he didn't turn into bats or drink blood. But his cruelty was so extreme, it made him immortal in legend. Stoker gave him fangs, Lugosi gave him a cape, Lee gave him fire, but Vlad gave him terror, and it is terror that lasts forever, particularly as it moulds and forms to the current zeitgeist. And so maybe the real horror isn't the undead, it's the cruelty of the living. Dracula never needed to rise from the grave because Vlad had already made him eternal. If you enjoyed this dive into Dracula's true story, hit like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments who's scarier, Vlad the Impaler or the Count himself.